always be shining bright. If I change everything about me, still the road travels just the same. Ain't nobody ever gonna doubt me.
Hi. Wow. Barry Rubin on our team. That was quite some wind-up music there. I had not realized that's what we were doing. It was great. Hey everyone, welcome to Rvat Live. I'm Sarah Longwell, and the Executive Director of Republican Voters Against Trump. I am joined by my partner in crime, Bill Kristol, who is well known from his ubiquitous presence on your televisions, giving prognostications about politics. And then I'm also joined today. We're very excited about today. Today's a huge day. For those of you who've been following Republican Voters Against Trump, obviously the crux and the core of our program is to have lifelong Republican voters talk about why they're not supporting Donald Trump in 2020. But that doesn't just extend to voters. We also have people who have worked in the Trump administration, who have seen things that will cause your blood to run cold, who have been brave enough to stand up. I always think about the people who've been willing to make testimonials about the bravery of every person that it takes to kind of stand up and say, look, this is my tribe, but I can't agree with what's going on here. But then there's another level of bravery to have actually worked in the administration, to have tried to do your best, and then to basically come out and tell the country what you saw while you were there. And that's what our two guests today, Miles Taylor and Elizabeth Neumann, have done. Both of them worked at the Department of Homeland Security. Miles was the chief of staff to Kirstjen Nielsen. And Elizabeth you have a long title, Elizabeth. It's the Assistant Secretary of Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And both of these guys made Republican Voters Against Trump, they made testimonials talking about why they couldn't support Donald Trump again in 2020 and why they were endorsing Joe Biden. Since they've made their announcements, which I think for both of you now has been a couple weeks, they've been on TV a lot talking about, commentary on news of the day, but we've got thousands of people watching. And I want to talk just a little bit about what this experience has been like for you as people, who've sort of made this big leap. And one of the things I want to note is that there have been people who have sort of spoken out from the administration anonymously in the past, right? There haven't been that many people who've been willing to put their names on their critiques of the president. So maybe starting with you, Miles, since you were the first one to do it, what made you take that leap? Why'd you do it?
Well, I appreciate you guys having Elizabeth and I on. I just can't help look at the comments. Apparently our own Tim Miller says I look like a Republican consultant Ken doll. So anyway, Tim, thanks for jumping into the comments. We are paying attention today.
He's also roasting me on there about having fewer followers than Miles. You're a really great help, Tim. Appreciate it.
We want to keep it fun for the people who are watching, but yours was a serious question, Sarah, so I'm going to try to give you a serious answer. And that is, look, I don't prejudge folks who've tried to shed light on this administration, anonymously or not. I mean, we certainly had a really important intelligence community whistleblower who, I think feared for their lives to report what ultimately ended up getting the president impeached. But I do think it's important that when people are able to, that they actually attach their names to the criticisms about this president, because it allows us to, I think, dive deeper into the stories and assess the credibility of the people who are making those claims. I don't speak for Elizabeth, but I'm sure she'd agree with me on this. We welcome the scrutiny. Please, test our recollections here. I'm not trying to claim I was Donald Trump's best friend and I spent every day in the White House with him. But did I have enough exposure on a semi-regular basis with the president to form a judgment on his character, his fitness for office, and his vision? Absolutely and unequivocally. And I'll testify to that all the way through and beyond November 3rd. So for me, the reason I decided to come forward was, quite frankly, I got fed up with the fact that some of these other big names hadn't come forward. Certainly we'd heard Secretary Mattis came out and wrote an article in The Atlantic that was very powerful in June after nationwide civil unrest. We saw John Bolton publish a book, and we can quibble about whether it was the right approach or the right time, but he at least explained what he saw. I was concerned that enough people that I'd worked with weren't coming forward that I felt like I needed to do that myself. Who the hell is Miles Taylor? I don't know, and most people probably shouldn't care. And after this, don't need to care. But because you weren't hearing some of the other names out there, I felt like it was imperative for me to at least do my little part and come explain what I saw, which, by the way, I will say is very representative of how members of this cabinet and this administration, senior staff at the White House, felt about the president then and feel about the president now. The things I'm saying aren't talking points inserted into a secret Dem operative Trojan horse named Miles Taylor. I'm a Republican who wanted this president to succeed, wanted this White House to be functioning, and wanted the government to do what it's supposed to do. It didn't. It was beyond dissatisfying. It was deeply, deeply troubling, and we shouldn't be scared to go out and tell that truth.
Elizabeth, was it when you decided to speak up, had you seen what Miles had done and then decided to say something, or had you already made up your mind that you really felt like you had to say something and you were just kind of waiting for the right moment?
Yeah, it was probably the latter. I had actually reached out to Miles in early July when we started to see DHS get so extremely politicized, and they were putting troops into Portland, and it just is not what the department was founded to do. It was so clearly being done for political purposes. The stuff going on in Portland, I'm not saying that it's not a crime to vandalize or harm a building, but the idea that we were so concerned about a building compared to the racial injustice we've been seeing this summer come to the forefront of our conscience, what was going on with COVID, and the fact that the actual number, statistically speaking, you have way more deaths in America caused by white supremacists, white nationalists, as compared to Antifa. I just felt like they were so skewing the picture. But it was probably a combination of what happened in Lafayette Square, that abuse of power, and then what was happening in Portland, that I was like, it's enough. And so my initial intent was, sign on to a letter, which I did. The national security, former Republican national security officials for Biden signed on to that letter. And Miles was persuading me that we needed to say more. We needed to tell our story. And I hesitated for a couple of reasons. One, when you're in the security field, you are trained that the nature of national security is inherently bipartisan, and there are differences in views between a Republican national security official versus a Democrat, but it's not nearly as drastic as, say, domestic policy tends to be, and consequently, you tended, at least all of my mentors tended to shy away from inherently partisan activity. So you might support a candidate, but you do it by signing onto a letter or writing policy papers. You don't go out and speak out. So that was, I had to wrestle with that. I had to wrestle with who I was actually going to vote for, because I knew I could not vote for Trump, but it took me a while to build a case for myself that I was comfortable voting for Biden. And then the last, but probably the most important piece was I needed to wrestle with the fact that by talking about these issues, you garner you invite potential security issues for your family, and I have young kids, so you as a mom, the worst case scenario is something happening to them, and so my husband and I had to wrestle with that and prayed a lot about it before we felt like the Lord was saying it's the right thing to speak out, and I'm very thankful for my faith, because once you feel like God says go there, you kind of are like, all right, Lord, I'm going to trust you with protecting my family. But it took me probably 8 weeks to get to the point where I was sitting down in front of the camera and actually talking through why I can't support this president anymore.
I want to get back in just one second to the something you said there about how you sort of had to come to the conclusion to vote for Biden affirmatively, because I actually think it's a big distinction. Before I do, Bill, you've been around politics a long time. You were chief of staff to a vice president. How like on a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy is it to have people from within an administration coming out in an election year to endorse the other person because what they saw was so alarming?
Yeah, it almost never happens. Maybe 1 or 2 obviously disgruntled people who were fired or, had huge run-ins with their bosses, but that wasn't the case here. You both left voluntarily, and probably could have, if you wanted just to stay and pad your resume, you could have done that, so you didn't. So it's very unusual. Sometimes you have people from one party support the other party when the administration ends. There were people from the George W. Bush administration who supported Barack Obama, for example, because they thought time for a change. But to come out against the re-election of the president you served is difficult, honestly, because you did serve him, and you may not have liked him personally, but you have a huge number of, both of you, of personal friends and acquaintanceships in the administration, and you're proud of some of the things you did, I'm sure, and as you should be. So it's hard. I mean, people shouldn't underestimate that. And I think it's really admirable what you've done, and admirable that you're doing it publicly and not shying away from it. I spoke on the phone to someone just about an hour ago who was also at a senior position in the Trump administration, left a few months ago. I think you probably both know this person a little bit, but in a different agency, but senior and sensitive job. That person doesn't want to come forward for understandable reasons, and that's fine. Just going about his or her business. And but for me, the striking thing was, so I asked this person, well, what's it really like? I mean, I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but is it as bad as I think? And this person, who hadn't seen Trump that much personally, not as much as Miles did, for example, but it was at the level just below that. So you see all the effects of what Trump orders, says something in some meeting, pulls something out of his hat or reverses himself. And then this person was one of the ones, sort of the levels you guys were at too, where, you have to implement it. You have to figure out how to make it work. You have to try to mitigate the damage. Maybe you try to go back and help your boss persuade Trump not to do something disastrous. This was foreign policy related mostly. And this person said to me, it's worse than you think. It's worse than you think. And it's getting worse. Some of the guardrails that were there early aren't there anymore in terms of the people who could say no, or even the internal constraints on Trump feeling that, well, gee, I really shouldn't do that. And a second term would be even worse. A second term reelected would be truly terrifying. And so I think I want to just emphasize, like Miles has said, that you're not alone or unique in this judgment. And that's really true. There are many people who've come to similar judgments. Not that many have come forward as you two have.
And Bill, there's something I want to hone in on, and Elizabeth mentioned it. And we've got someone in the comments that just said this. Would you ever have thought that speaking out against an American president would endanger your life? I would have never thought that. I had the same concerns as Elizabeth. It is that bad right now. And we should talk very frankly about this, because this is a factor here. And this is something that in short TV hits, Elizabeth and I don't get to really get into. And that is, we are in an environment that the president has created that is so contentious in this country that both of us and others who've considered speaking out are actually having to take measures to protect our lives against someone who might just go off the handle and do something stupid. That's how contentious this environment has gotten, and the president has created it that way. Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of death threats. This has been terrible for my job and my friendships and my marriage and my personal security, you name it. So, the folks who want to come forward and say, these people are just trying to get famous off of Donald Trump, have no idea the actual toll that's exacted upon people who speak out. Now, this is not a self-pity exercise. No one's got to worry about me. I'm going to be just fine. I'm going to make it through. This is going to be, it's going to be okay. But this is what we're encountering when we're going to talk to other people who are thinking about speaking out. They're watching this and they're afraid, and they see what the president does. And he does wink, nod comments like, well, you know what we used to do to traitors back in the day? We'd hang them. And he says things like that. That sort of loose talk makes people genuinely afraid for their families and their jobs to come out and do this. That in and of itself, I think, is a damning indictment of this president and this administration and the impact they've had on civil discourse in our country, that people would be afraid in the United States of America to exercise their First Amendment rights and talk about the president in an election. That's how bad it's gotten.
And what kind of reaction are you getting from your? I mean, you were in the administration a long time, Miles. So what do you hear from people who are still inside? Are they mad at you, or are they saying, "Thank God somebody's saying this out loud"? Like, what reaction do you get?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'd be curious to hear what Elizabeth's answer is, but it's been mixed. On the one hand, there have been people who have completely surprised me. Last night, I went and met up with someone that's a senior person who served in the White House, a senior administration official, who I had no idea shared these same sentiments. I assumed, because you assume about 90% of people in the administration feel this way, because it's very obvious. The administration is unstable, the president is crazy, he can't make decisions. I mean, this isn't hyperbole, it's just the reality that we would talk about all the time. Went and met up with this person, and they said, I'm just so glad you guys are doing this. I wish I could. I'm worried I won't have a job and I'll go broke if I go do this right now, but I'm so glad you guys are doing this. This is someone who sees the president on a semi-regular basis. I, of course, tried to urge them to come do this. I was like, don't worry, we'll find a place for you to land. But I mean, these people have bills to pay. They've got mortgages and like kids and stuff. And so this person was like, I don't think I can do it. That's been surprising to me to hear from those folks. But look, like anything in life, when you speak up, that's really when you find out who your true friends are. And yeah, I've lost some friends in this administration, some people who, by the way, harbor the same sentiments that Elizabeth and I do, who think the president is genuinely unfit for office, and are still serving in their jobs in this administration and have decided, to cease communications with us because they want to keep their cushy, high-profile jobs. That's really unfortunate, but this election has been really revealing when it comes to character in a lot of ways.
Elizabeth, I am interested too, just in your experience. Has it been similar to Miles or different?
Yeah, I think very similar. People that you didn't expect to hear from, and I had a staff of 70 people that were all mostly career officials. So it's been interesting to hear from them, from people in the intelligence community I worked with, from people in other agencies I worked with who have reached out to say thank you. I'm so glad you're speaking out. I know that was hard, and let me know how I can support you. So there's definitely a strong contingent of those that have been dealing with this chaos for 3 years that are just so desperate to go back to normalcy, to go back to kind of just worry about the terrorists. That would be great if that was the thing I had to wake up and deal with every day, and instead they're dealing with just a level of chaos that's really hard to describe succinctly. I've also been surprised that, as Miles said, there are a number of people that wish they could speak out. Their companies won't let them. They are not in a position to go on a leave of absence the way Miles did. I don't have a job right now, so it was kind of good timing. I didn't have to deal with that issue, but there are a number of people that totally know he is incompetent, lacks character, that he's doing damage to our country, but they think they can hold it together. They think they have bought into, well, it wasn't that bad the last 3 years. We can hang on for 4 more years. And like the value proposition is we will get something out of it. Like we will have lower taxes or avoid a Biden tax hike. We will get more conservative judges. And those arguments I find kind of deceiving, because I think at least what we have observed is that he is disintegrating. As time has gone by, he is less likely to do the conservative Republican thing. And then you get to the other side of an election where he does not have to play to anybody anymore. There's no constituency. It's just whatever his whim is on any given day. That's the piece that scares me the most. He's so unpredictable and cozies up with dictators that the damage that he could cause, and nobody can rein him in short of an impeachment, it could be devastating for our country. But there are a lot of people that think, hey, we're holding it together. We can do it for another 4 years. And you're like, that's not what democracy is about. The American people deserve to know that the only reason some of the good has happened is because you've been holding it together. The American people deserve to make a vote based on all of the facts. And that's part of what compelled me to speak out. It's not if they hear this, they hear that he's incompetent, they hear that he's incapable of doing the job, that he cares more about himself than the country, that he cozies up with dictators. If the American people see all of that and vote for him anyway, I mean, then we have a much deeper problem in our country than the leader. That's a systemic heart problem throughout our country, and maybe I should quit politics and go into ministry at that point, because that is so much graver than where we are, I think, at this moment. I think today you just have a lot of people that are deceived because the Republican Party has done such a great job at spin and telling you that because you're a Republican and, if you were to vote for Biden, look at all of the bad things that could happen, and it would change your life as you know it. It would change our country fundamentally. And the hyperbole there is fairly ironic. I'm not saying that I love all of Biden's policies, and there are a number of us that aren't big Kamala Harris fans. We were kind of disappointed with that selection, but that doesn't change the fact that they will at least get us back to some norm where we can start operating as where the Congress can start doing their job. And part of the reason Miles and I started Repair was, let's have that conversation. Let's have those policy fights in a normal context with a president that knows how to do the job. And we can fight that fight on November, I forget what day election day is, but on the day after the election, we can start fighting that fight then. But today, the terms are not, I don't like Joe Biden's policy and I don't want a tax hike. It's the country might not exist at another end of 4 years of Donald Trump. He is that depraved and incapable of doing the job.
Yeah, I mean, can I echo something really quick? And then, Sarah, I'm sure you've got other questions. I just want to say the whole goal here is let's get America to its 300th birthday. Okay? Like, let's just try to hit 300 years old. And I don't think Elizabeth's being hyperbolic. I think 4 more years of Trump puts us at risk of not getting to that 300th birthday later in the century because of the damage to the foundational fabric of the republic. We can talk about Repair and other things a little bit more later, but Donald Trump is not a Republican. He's not a conservative. That's why both of us came out of this administration jaded. I mean, we're both lifelong Republicans, although I'll caveat that. Someone called me out the other day and indicated that in high school somewhere I wrote that I was a Democrat in high school. So I'm gonna amend that line whenever I use it, is I may have supported a Democrat at one point in high school. But I've got books on my shelf there's a man named Kristol and some really interesting characters here. That wasn't product placement for Bill and his family. But we're Republicans, and we wanted a president to govern as a Republican. Donald Trump governs on the basis of moment-to-moment impulse and self-interest. And I didn't want it to be that way. But that's what I witnessed over and over and over again. So I'd rather have a Democratic president that I can spend 4 years in the loyal opposition opposing than have a man who pretends to be a Republican but really is only out for himself rather than the country. So.
Hey, can you just expand though on one thing you just said that I'm super interested in, which is when you say like we might not get to our 300th birthday, and Elizabeth says like, well, we still have a country. Like, what do you think the next 4 years of Donald Trump without facing an election? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I'd say this. Elizabeth made a great point earlier. It's not actually even so much about the person anymore. It's about the people. It's about us. So if we really think that this man and his character reflect our national character, then we've got some deeper soul searching to do. Because I think that it says that we are so deeply conflicted about our values as a country, all the way down to the household level, that we're going to have a difficult time doing what countries are supposed to do, which is sort of deciding on a set of shared principles, which we convene around and moving forward and kind of rowing in the same direction. We're going to be incapable of performing that basic function as a people if this is what our national character is. If Donald Trump and his personality and lack of integrity are really reflective of us. So I think there's fundamental questions about civic engagement that are raised by his continuance in office if he makes it to a second term. I mean, you go back to, de Tocqueville's down here on the shelf, and his book, Democracy in America, he probably has the most well-written tome about what made America special. I mean, the classic book on American exceptionalism, as de Tocqueville talks about, how America was so different than every other country because of the depth of our civic engagement. He talks about associations across the country. We are a nation of joiners. We create churches, we create clubs, we get together, and in the working together, we are a thriving democracy, and that's why we were Reagan's and John Winthrop's, shining city upon a hill, is because of that interest in associating and those shared values. A second term of Donald Trump is the biggest red flag, 5-alarm fire you could possibly think of to suggest that we're veering away from that tradition and that reputation. I mean, that's at least what it looks like to me.
Elizabeth, do you think that is there anything like concrete that you're worried?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with everything Miles said, but then I'm also thinking about this from a security issue, right? So most conservatives believe that the primary purpose of the federal government as opposed to our state or local governments is that providing for the common defense. There's the interstate commerce clause too, which is important. But when you really boil down to, if you got rid of, all of the extra stuff, like what you absolutely have to survive, you really, really have to have that ability to protect from foreign and domestic enemies. And every person that gets sworn into government takes an oath and promises to protect the Constitution and to defend it from all enemies, foreign and domestic. The president takes a similar oath. It's slightly different, but similar. So if you go to the core of what government is supposed to be, and this is part of the process that I had to go through in deciding to speak out, because there are many things on the Biden campaign platform that I don't support, and so when you just view it as, okay, how many things are in the pro column versus how many things in the con column, and you're just enumerating them, maybe there are more things that I'm like, okay, you get a little bit more out of Trump. And if you're just looking at policy, but the core is that security and common defense. And if that is all other things, important to consider, but if you can't do number one, then in my mind, you're disqualified. So the concerns I have during my tenure, one of the roles that I had was to go to National Security Council meetings at my level. It's the level right before you go to a deputy secretary meeting. And we would work on various policies to do the things you would expect. We got to defeat ISIS. We have a priority of maximum pressure on Iran. How do you counter China and both from an economic as well as other activities that they have underway? Disinformation. So you go multiple meetings a week on a variety of topics, trying to form out our policies and our actions to be able to advance whatever the topic is. It was not unusual for us to have the experience of a senior director coming in, somebody that works at the White House, coming in, telling us that he had talked to the president, and the president said, this is the number one policy, and hey, all of you agency people, you better show up and execute X. And I can't give you the specific example because it's classified. But of course, the people in the room start to politely raise their hands, ask some questions. This seems to be a shift from what we were planning to do, from what the deputies or the principals had approved a few weeks ago. Why are we all of a sudden doing this? And if it weren't for a handful of people at the Department of Defense saying, no, we're not going to do what you told us to do, it needs to get elevated up, like the president needs to tell the Secretary of Defense this, we would have been at the brink of war a number of times. Now, why is that important? The important thing to keep in mind is that some of those people that were saying no at DOD, they're no longer there. The people that are replacing them at many of the agencies do not have the background or experience to know why doing activity X might lead you to the brink of war. So even if that's not their intent, they wouldn't have the background knowledge to know, like, hey, that's a really bad idea. Maybe I should go talk to some of my subject matter experts to find out what would be the consequence if we followed this path. So my concern is that when you go into a second term and the guardrails are off and you don't have people with subject matter expertise in positions of critical responsibility, and then you also have the already chaotic environment of senior directors that just walk into the Oval Office and say, hey, boss, I had this idea. And he's like, sounds good. And they take it as, oh, well, I can go direct an agency to go carry out this activity that I came up with overnight. That is just not the way government is supposed to run. And we don't have anybody on the inside left anymore to stop those horrible, horrible decisions from being made that could lead us to a brink of war.
You know, what's funny about, it's not funny. None of it's funny, actually. It's terrifying and crazy. But Bill and I have been spending the last couple of years trying to get people to speak up. But what you're saying right now actually sounds like a riff that I have heard Bill do for the last couple of years that is about what a second term of Donald Trump would look like. And he warned of exactly the things that you're talking about. Bill, when you hear them describe it this way, what does it make you think in terms of you having been somebody who really predicted or has really talked about this idea of the guardrails being off, all of the good people being gone, there being no constraints? Like, what does it make you think?
I don't know how prescient I was. I think Elizabeth just said it extremely well, though. I mean, maybe because I was in government and I was really at similar levels of sort of chief of staff and, sort of just below the top levels. And but seeing the consequences of decisions, God knows you can have well-staffed decisions and they can turn out poorly. And we can be critical of a lot of things a lot of administrations have done. But the degree to which you can really do damage, I mean, real damage. And look at the pandemic, right? I mean, so we're really talking about, I just saw a good article that wasn't an anti-Trump article and really just said, look, let's just look in a very cold-blooded way, so to speak. If we had pursued policies sort of like Canada or like the EU, not perfect, they made mistakes too, but where do we think we'd be? And this was a very kind of, very policy analysis, Kennedy School type thing. We'd probably have about half as many people dead as we would have in America. We wouldn't have zero. That's unfair. There would have been the virus was coming and it would have had it would have spread some and we would have made some mistakes and people didn't fully understand how to deal with it at the beginning. So it's unfair to say that 195,000 people are Donald Trump's fault, frankly. But they really did run the numbers and it's sort of, we would have 80,000 deaths maybe or 60 if we had not encouraged some of these, all these states to open up too early and everything else, obviously. So, I mean, that's real consequences. And finally, I do feel like people are kind of understanding what I was so alarmed, but the economy was chugging along. We sort of avoided, as Elizabeth says, more narrowly than people realize, I think. And we'll learn about this in the history books, I suppose. We avoided, really dangerous decisions in terms of national security. We avoided too much damage, though we suffered some, of course, to the rule of law. Ukraine is a good instance, though, what Trump was impeached about. Every person who stopped Trump from doing what he wanted to do in Ukraine, get a foreign government to manufacture evidence to damage a political opponent of his here at home. I think it was literally every person who emerged as having refused to do this or put obstacles in the way or eventually went to the ombudsman and complained about what Trump was doing in the White House. All those people are gone. Right, the ambassadors, Ambassador Yovanovitch, Ambassador Taylor, people from the State Department, John Bolton, a very hawkish guy who's not exactly a shrinking violet, but he said, no, this is a drug deal. We can't do this. Of course, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. So that is what really, it's a little hard to bring home maybe if you haven't been in government, just how dangerous and disastrous it can be when all the guardrails go. And just the way I would put it very simply is, think of Portland, think of the unrest, think of the divisiveness, and think of that in a second term. And then think of the international liberal order, which is a little precarious as it is. Think of NATO, think of dealing with these dictatorships and authoritarian states and the challenges holding the democratic alliances together and how much damage Trump has already done, and think of that in a second term. And it's bad. It really is. It's real consequences. We're not talking about, oh, gee, it will be unpleasant, and he'll be kind of vulgar and it will be, who wants to have that for another 4 years, like having a bad guest at a dinner party, having to have, that person stay for an extra couple of hours. It sort of ruins the party, but we're way beyond that. And I do think the pandemic perhaps has brought that home. I mean, it's very much a tribute to people like Miles and Elizabeth, and a lot of stuff that could have gone wrong didn't go wrong in those last few years. But, you know, in terms of foreign policy, but you saw it with Portland, you saw it with, I mean, it really is, I really do worry about a second term in a fundamental way. I very much agree with Miles and Elizabeth. Very different from, gee, it's a president I don't like, and they're going to make some decisions I don't agree with.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that right now we are measuring the president's success in office by the number of dead Americans should be a big enough signal of what a second term might be like. And I would say it's going to be the same metric in a second term, not just because of coronavirus, but to Elizabeth's earlier point, national security. That's my biggest concern about the second term, is most of the bad things that Donald Trump wanted to do that we persuaded him not to, in most cases, were really bad national security decisions that we actually thought would put American lives in danger. So as Bill notes, a second term is specifically things like pulling out of NATO, destroying defense alliances that we've had for years, pulling troops out of places where they're fighting to make sure the bad guys don't come here and kill Americans, cutting deals with really, really bad dictators that want to kill us, that are spying on us, that are stealing our secrets. It's a lot of really bad stuff. And I mean it when I say on a weekly basis, these ideas would bubble up out of the Oval Office, and people like John Kelly and Jim Mattis and Rex Tillerson would have to rush over to the White House and put the bad idea back in the box. But those people are largely gone. Donald Trump, if you can give him credit for anything, has a really good sniffer for people that have a conscience. He finds them and he purges them as quickly as possible. And that's what's happened in this administration. So second term, all those bad things we talked about, and the crazy things, like when Donald Trump would call us up and say, I actually want you to build a moat in front of the wall and fill it with snakes and alligators. That wasn't a joke when he told us that, because he called us multiple times and said, I need a cost estimate for how to build a moat and keep snakes and alligators alive, because that's how I'm going to secure the border. Those types of crazy ideas won't have people standing in the way of them in a second term, and you'll have folks that are willing to just say, yes, Mr. President, and go and implement it. That is very alarming. That's why we've got to take this vote on November 3rd pretty seriously.
What is going on with I mean, I am always very struck by descriptions like the ones you give, or descriptions like the ones that John Bolton give, that Donald Trump is an existential threat to the country, like deeply threatening. And yet you hear people even like Bolton say, but I don't know about voting for Joe Biden or this. I mean, part of the reason I think that it doesn't break through to the American public, this alarm that you're talking about, and it's an alarm I think all of us share, is because things look normal, because every Republican senator and House member is just kind of going along and saying, oh, I didn't hear anything about that Woodward book and the accusations therein. You know, so what is going on with a bunch of responsible people whom we voted for, admired, supported for much of our careers? Why aren't they saying something if they're seeing these crazy things that you describe?
Elizabeth, you want to start with that one?
I think there are some, those that are still on the inside are feeling the burden of trying to do the best they can, hold it all together. I think there are others that have left. I mean, and Miles talked about this. They have a variety of reasons that they're concerned about speaking out. I've heard stories of, people in the White House threatening people. You're not going to be able to work in this town. You're not going to be able to work anywhere. You got to remember, and it's funny because I'll say this to some friends up in New Jersey, and I'm not from the Northeast. I'm from Texas, but you're like, oh, well, he is a New York guy. He kind of had this whole thing with the mafia. Like, is it really, are those connections still there? Is there something to be worried about? And your Jersey friends are like, nah, he was never that good at, actually, his bark is worse than his bite. But nevertheless, you're still being threatened. You're being threatened with your reputation being damaged. You're being threatened with not being able to work. You're being, and if you have kids, like, the threats become really real. Like, your first and primary duty is to protect your children. So, for some folks, like, it's too much. And it's hard to, I mean, there are others, and Miles, maybe over to you to speak. There are some that are getting ready to speak out, but it is there. There are very real things that they are weighing and trying to make that decision.
I'll give one example, and we'll protect this person's identity, Elizabeth. But there is someone that was at a very senior level in the Trump administration and left. You could think sort of the cabinet level of the administration and engagement with the president, who was very, very close to speaking out against this president, and may still, and I really hope this individual does. But the person has a concern about their livelihood. There's a really good chance if they go forward with speaking out that they're going to lose the job that they're in right now. And, again, I go back to this individual has a mortgage to pay and has, life things to consider and can't really go destitute to speak out against the president and, has really good intentions and wants to do the right thing. On top of that, there's just the fear. I mean, that goes to your question, Sarah. The president has a vice-like grip on this party and has created so much fear. But to folks out there in the country watching this right now, I can tell you, I used to work with these members of Congress all the time. I used to work with these senators all the time. Bill knows these people. Elizabeth's testified in front of these people. Sarah knows these people. Behind the scenes, when they get together with us, they say these same things. They say, you're right. You're absolutely right. He's crazy. I don't think he's fit for office. But I'm going to lose re-election if I go up against him. Or they'll crush me, or they'll destroy my reputation, or they're going to dig up dirt about my past. And he's able to do that effectively. It's scary. I mean, look, the only thing, second only to the coronavirus pandemic, we say is the spinelessness pandemic right now in Washington, is people are just really, really scared to stand up to him. And it's not totally a knock against them because, again, some of these concerns they have are very real. But it's hard to get over that hump. And Donald Trump knows it. There was something that he used to say all the time. I don't know if Elizabeth ever heard this in meetings, but Trump loves to use this anecdote. He talks about suing people. And he says, I don't know if he said this publicly before, I'm sure he has somewhere because I've heard it multiple times from him in private, where he says, it doesn't matter if someone else has actually wronged you. He's like, if they are intimidating you, he's like, you just sue them. He's like, and that's what I used to do in business. I would sue people to shut them up. And he said it worked. He goes, you never threaten a lawsuit. You actually do the lawsuit. He's like, people aren't scared when you threaten them. You just sue them. And that's his whole ethos, is you just go after people and it'll shut them up. And boy, has it worked effectively for him. But that's all the more reason why people do need to speak out, is to show that it doesn't work.
Can I add on to that real quick, Sarah? That there was a film that was done a year or two ago by BBC. You can find it on Netflix, and it's about tells Trump's story from the 1970s to the day that he came down the tower, the escalator in Trump Tower to announce his presidency. And I had never watched it, but I watched it earlier this summer, and it helped put into context everything that I had just witnessed, and this realization that he is absolutely consistent with the way that he has operated for his entire life. But one of the comments by somebody they interviewed who had spent a ton of time with them is that they asserted that he learned from his dad that there are two types of people in this world. There are the people that are victims, or there are the attackers, or the forget the actual word he used, but he basically came to this conclusion that I'm either going to be a victim or I have to go on the attack. And so he decided, I don't want to be a victim, I'm going to be the attacker. He literally knows no other way how to operate. And that was kind of formative for me to help understand what we're dealing with at his core is somebody that isn't interested in hearing other perspectives and forming the right opinion. It is just about winning. It is just about always going on the attack. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a mom, but at some point you're like, enough. We're not going to operate this way. And the way that you deal with the bully is you stand up to a bully. So there's, in talking to the people that are scared of him, I get it. I was scared. But I eventually got to this place where you're like, our country is too great. We need to be able to, speak truth and do it with courage, because that's who we are as a people. So I've been trying to, as Miles and I talk to various people, understand the perspective, and a lot of people do have these constraints, especially when a company won't let you come out. But even there, you kind of want to tell the companies, like, you know what, like let your people speak truth. They don't have to be overly political. They don't even have to do a video. They don't have to go on CNN or MSNBC or Fox and talk about it this publicly. But the companies should be allowing their people to say what they experienced, and if they want to sign on to a letter that says you don't think he's qualified. That frustrates me a bit, that we have so many business equities in Washington, D.C. that are just so scared. I mean, they're scared that their contracts are going to get pulled. I mean, Miles and I heard a story of somebody that got booted off of a contract because they had said something negative about the president. Like, the retribution is real, but the companies should stand up and say, hey, like, our people get to have a First Amendment right to their speech, and we're going to let them do that. And no, you don't get to exact retribution by kicking us off a contract that we won fair and square, or not award a contract based on the merits just because somebody on our company said something negative about the president.
Right. We're going to run up against time here, but I've got this burning question I want to ask, because it's the thing that has, and you guys have both talked about it a little bit, but it's the thing that has, I mean, I'm concerned about a wide array of things that Trump has done, but nothing do I find more perplexing and just outright crazy. Today he tweets just inexplicably about Kim Jong-un's health and that he's healthy and he should not be underestimated. In Woodward's book, it talks about how much he admires Erdogan. Obviously, he's got this incredibly strange relationship with Vladimir Putin that nobody can quite understand what's going on there. Can you explain why this guy likes dictators so much, and why people aren't freaking out about this? I mean, even the Khashoggi news, right? That he was like, I was there to save his ass for MBS. What is going on, and why isn't everybody losing their mind about it?
That's a great one. Look, all we can do is speculate, but I'll tell you the speculation that virtually everyone in this cabinet shared. And again, my goal's not been to name names and call people out, but I'm telling you, the household names that you know have had this conversation, and this is what they say. Two reasons. One, the most compelling and obvious reason, and the simplest explanation, is when Trump looks in the mirror, that's who he sees. And if you go to any of his comments that he's made publicly towards Putin or President Xi or Kim Jong-un, they are loving, they are affectionate, and almost always they include some joking aside about how jealous he is of the power that they wield. He makes this joke all the time with dictators, but to Donald Trump, when he looks in the mirror, that's not a joke. He really wishes, this is the man who said, maybe I'll have 12 years in office, and talks about being all powerful, and said to us in person that he felt like he had magical authorities that would allow him to do anything. And I mean, he really has inherently autocratic tendencies. I used to think that that was beyond the pale. So when people were saying that in year one, they'd say, Donald Trump's a dictator. I recoiled. I'd say, well, come on, guys. Like, this is like extreme rhetoric. He's not a dictator. He's a guy who's got bad impulses, and we're going to do our best. Here I am now in year 4, and I'm like, nope, he unequivocally has dictatorial tendencies. I mean, he really just has a proclivity for power. So that's one. Bucket 2 is another simple explanation, which is that the president anticipates that when he leaves, these relationships with dictators will be materially beneficial to him and his businesses. Now, hear me out on this. Donald Trump knows that when he deals with Democratic heads of state and countries in the West, that because of their systems of checks and balances like ours, they don't have the ability to unilaterally cut expensive contracts and arrange side deals and help businesses like the Trump Organization stand up hotels. But what Donald Trump learned through many decades in business is that in these more autocratic countries, those leaders do have the ability to sign contracts, cut deals, waive laws and regulations to allow them to succeed. There's one thing Donald Trump has told us his whole life he cares about more than anything. He's told us is money. Being rich is the thing that matters the most to him. When he leaves, he wants to remain rich and get richer. And I do firmly believe the president views those relationships he has with foreign dictators as something that will be very important to him to continue to build out his legacy of wealth when he leaves the White House. I'm not the only one. You go to John Bolton's book, and John Bolton has made the case pretty convincingly that some of the comments the president made towards folks like Erdogan in Turkey were potentially geared towards his own personal material benefit once he left office. So I think those two explanations are really what tell the story. We should be appalled by both, and the fact that they might be equally true is even more appalling, but that would be my explanation for it.
Well, I'm going to let Bill get the last word and close us out. But before we do that, do you guys want to say a bit about repair? And also, do you think that there'll be more people who are going to follow your lead and come out and say what they've seen?
Elizabeth?
Over to you, Miles. Talk about repair.
So real quickly, we hope to have more to tell you about repair soon. You can follow us on Twitter at Repair Republic and at www.repair45.com. But what are we? .org. Repair is the Republican Political Alliance for Integrity and Reform. It's an organization that we're starting with the help of Sarah and Bill to really focus on the post-Trump Republican Party. We've got a lot of great groups, including Rvat right now focused on defeating the president in November. But we also, at the same time, need to start laying the groundwork for what the GOP is going to become. How do we repair the damage done to the party by Trump? More importantly, how do we repair the damage done to the country by this president? So our organization will bring together a group of advisors to talk about moving beyond the Trump era, restoring the principles of free minds and free markets and free people that the GOP was founded upon, and just creating a bigger tent party. I mean, Donald Trump has shrunk this party so small that it's just a one-man camping tent. No one's really allowed in here anymore, and it's got a very sycophantic cult of personality approach towards politics. We've got to welcome a more diverse range of ideas in the party. And so that's what Repair is going to try to do. And in that process, Sarah, we really hope that we're going to have more folks joining us. I think that we will have some more ex-Trump officials joining us. And every day we're having conversations to try to get more people off the bench to speak out against this president.
Bill, you want to bring us home?
I guess I would first of all thank both of you for really what you're doing and for coming forth and for doing those initial testimonials for us, for Republican voters against Trump, which we've each gotten, each of yours has gotten 5, 6, 7 million views, and then of course subsequent TV appearances, and now I think I have an ad up in North Carolina with Elizabeth, and so it's really been great, I think, for the cause, and obviously you have additional credibility as someone who voted for people who voted for Trump and tried to help make it work. I mean, but I would urge everyone who's watching to consider, if they haven't done them already, do those videos. Go to rvat.org, rvat.org. It's very easy. Just do something on your own phone. If you have little hesitation about it, we will send an email and someone in our office will help you do it. Those things are really, I think, are having an effect. Sarah's done a lot of studies. Obviously, we're not throwing money after these things without making sure that they are having an effect. We're targeting swing voters. We're not in just to make a splash we do some splashy ads, but most of this is really, these are people who are Republicans, most of whom, the large majority of whom voted for Donald Trump, explaining in their own words, from their own points of view, why they can't vote for Trump in 2020. And some of them are motivated by matters of character, and some are motivated by foreign policy issues, and some have rethought things because of Helsinki, and others because of Lafayette Square, and others because of the COVID disaster. And it's interesting I find it personally interesting just to watch them because of the diversity of reason. It's a big country, right? A lot of people who are motivated by a lot of different things, and I think we've done a pretty good job of being a venue for these people to speak. And there's a lot of research that shows that really does get to those voters who are on the fence, who, as Elizabeth was describing, are sort of agonizing about whether they can cross the aisle, who might still approve of certain policies that Republicans have, or they have long-time affiliation with the party, or they're not certain that the media is telling the truth all the time in its criticism of Trump. Seeing someone else who's a Republican, someone else who voted for Trump, someone else who's made that journey is pretty convincing, I think. And so we're happy to have more than we need. It would be great to have more such videos. And I really would urge people to do that. Or if you've done it, get your friends to do it. Do whatever else you can, incidentally, in terms of the election, whether it's poll watching or contributing to different organizations that are trying to achieve a good outcome in November. volunteering, obviously phone calling, whatever. It's a great country that we can do all these things. We should cherish the democratic privileges we have. But anyway, from our point of view, I really just want to make this pitch when we have so many people watching at one time. And watching two people who did videos to contribute, because you never know. And look, some of them get 20,000, 40,000 people. That's still important. Some of them take off and get many more. You never know who out there could look at your video and say, that really speaks to me. And I wasn't sure I could really make this leap, or that it was the right thing to do, but I think it is the right thing to do. So thank you for watching.
Yes, thanks to everybody for watching. And I want to underscore, both Elizabeth and Miles talked about that fear. And I know that's true. And I think that the magic of what you guys did, and of every person who speaks out and makes a video, what it does is it creates a sense of safety in numbers. It creates a new tribe, something where you can be a part of, where it's easier to be brave and to take that step, because there are absolutely toxic forces at work that are trying to make people feel afraid in this moment of speaking out. And I just want to say how much I admire both of you for doing that, because to get more people to do it, you always need the people who go first, and it's always the hardest to go first, and you guys did. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you being part of our little tribe, new tribe here of Republicans who are trying to do the right thing. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.